So we'll start with the lecture verse. Got to pull that out just a tad. Okay. The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So today I want to talk about the spirit of generosity. It's something I think we use a lot in our practice as dana. That's the translation of it. And I'm going to have a different take on it. This is going to be in light of the world seems a little dark and dim these days, and this is not kind of a Pollyanna approach to that, but it's more of just remembering that, you know what, there's really a lot of good stuff going on in the world, and I want to bring that out, and that includes our own practice. It's not something that's out there, but it's something available to us. So I have some stories, and the first one is an example of an action of compassion. It's a true story. They're all true stories. And this one I found on a website that I go to whenever I feel like I need a little bit of up-cheering. Here it goes. In a college economics class, students typically discuss concepts like supply and demand, opportunity costs, and purchasing power. But income inequality and climate change, not so much. Claire Brown is a professor of economics at the University of California, Berkeley. She says, "My students in Econ 1 used to come to me and say, 'Professor Brown, these models don't allow us to study the problems we care about. We care about inequality, we care about climate change, we care about global suffering, and these models just assume all that away.' So what she did is she created a class and wrote a book called Buddhist Economics. It's a way to evaluate the success of an economy that emphasizes social outcomes such as sustainability, income equality, and happiness above metrics such as gross national product. Prioritizing these values can lead to everything from regulations to all kinds of social safety nets and government programs to social norms and culture. And you bring them together so that the economy gives you the outcomes you want. So she says this approach to economics is not just for Buddhists. She said, I happen to practice Buddhism, but it's for anybody who cares about the human spirit and cares about the earth. Now this professor, she was not obliged to change the course of what she did. Economics has been taught in a certain way for a very, very long, in a very traditional way. You have certain principles and you have probably a lot of mathematic models that you follow. But she said she listened to her students and what they cared about was something that was relevant to them. So she changed the class without, so that they still understood the principles of economics, but it was a way that it tweaked it so that it was something that meant something to them. And I don't know about all of you, but if you take a class that doesn't mean anything to you, it kind of is one thing you pass the test, and that's the end of it. You know, I mean, you don't really get a lot of value out of it. So what she was doing, it was making it so that it was something that would be worthwhile for her young students that were concerned about issues that were not what the traditional class taught. And in my mind, what she did, that was an act of compassion. She listened to people, and then she took some action to try and help them out. The next story is about action of love and skillful means. And this is a story that Shakyamuni Buddha, in his time, he actually experienced. Okay, here we go. Once when he was at his monastery, Shakyamuni was sitting, and a woman came into the monastery. And she was starting to listen to him, and she fell in love with him. And after the lecture, she went up to him and she said, "I love you." And she wanted to hug him and, embrace him. And he replied, "I love you too." This is not what we usually think of he would do. And he said, "But I will not touch you." However, what he said was that someday he would. And his disciples did not understand what in the world he was talking about, and was thinking, has our master gone, has he fallen in love with somebody and decided to, pursue that? But what happened is nothing really came out of that present situation, and time passed, the woman left, and then everybody forgot about it. So years later, the monastery, the monks, said that there was a woman who was very sick and needed some help. And Shakyamuni said, "Oh, well, I'm going to go see how she's doing." And it just so happened it was the same woman who years ago had come to the Buddha and said, "I love you." And he responded with, he loved her too. But this time it was a very different situation. This time she was really sick, and she was so sick she had sores all over her body, and nobody would touch her. She was left alone, she was abandoned, and he found out about her. So he came to her and he said, "Can I help you?" He didn't have to do this, but he said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Yeah." And then she said, "Would you mind if I helped clean your sores, your open festering sores?" And she said, "Yes." So he touched her, okay? Didn't hug her, but so that was one thing. And so he cleaned her up. He took some time to attend to her when nobody else would. And at the end he said, "I love you." And it was something that woman really needed to hear at that particular time. Why? Because nobody else would pay any attention to her or acknowledge that there was a person, a human being in there. And what it did was that it helped her heal, for one thing, and it also enabled her to walk on the path of the Buddha's way. So he had a time when he could have done something that probably wasn't a good idea, but he waited and he let that energy not go away, but it actually had a time. He let it happen in another time with its own time, its own good time, where he could give expression to what he wanted to do with this woman. And that was to tell her that he loved her, which he did, and this was not a mundane, worldly kind of love, but a more universal quality of, for one thing, she needed the help, and she needed to hear that somebody cared about her in a situation where nobody would pay any attention to her. So it was, in my mind, was a way of, the timing was quite different, and this would be a skillful way to help people out in a way that they can respond to in a good time. And how do you know if it's a good time to help people out? Well, you just don't. You have to step out. But there is an intention there that was quite different than what the woman had brought to Shakyamuni, and how he responded. It was a very different take on what that love was. But it's one thing to remember that we do have that aspect of our practice is love. And it is not what we think of as a worldly kind of love. But it involves all of us, and it has a universal quality. And another story that I want to tell is about chairs. And this is an action, a generosity of spirit that involves maybe all of us, I don't know, for respect of things. And this happened a few months ago. We got some new chairs in our dining hall. So there was a need. We needed new chairs. So all the new chairs were in the dining hall. And they were all set in place, and they looked good. And so we all, went in and had and this is what we would sit in these chairs like 3 times a day to eat our meals. So we went in, sat in the chairs, but they were really hard to move. In fact, they made a lot of racket. And somebody said it was like, if you've ever taken a ferry and it kind of comes into a mooring, it has this kind of, that really, well, that's what the chairs had little pads, and they had these little plastic things on them, so it wasn't metal on the bottom of the chairs. But whenever you pulled them out, no matter how gently and carefully you did, it would go boop, 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 back and forth, and it made a lot of racket because there may be like 20 or 30 of us in there, right, trying to move these chairs. Well, without these chairs being noisy, we would not have had an opportunity to do things in a better way. So this generated a lot of conversation amongst us about how to move the chairs quietly because it was really noisy. So we talked to each other, experimented and came up with different ideas about, well, I tried this and I tried that. So we had this coming together of the community in a way that was totally a surprise and unexpected. And we worked things out. But it was really a challenge to move these chairs in a way that was not that boom, 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 It was really distracting. So we were trying to help ourselves out. We were also in the process learning to respect the chairs, whether we knew it or not. Because I got to thinking about all the chairs that we have sat in when we sit down to a meal, and I doubt if I have really given a whole lot of thought to the chair that I'm sitting in to eat my meal, because the food is the thing that I'm probably focused on when I sit down. But because of this situation, it gave us a chance to talk to each other and actually try to work out a problem to bring the Sangha in harmony together. And I liked that. And I hadn't really recognized that that's what we were doing. And I don't know that it's really kind of a big, dramatic thing, but we learned to respect the chairs, and we learned how to work together in harmony. And that is the Buddhist practice right there, whether we recognized it or not. Because what happened was we were all working together to make the chairs quieter, and then we got these felt pads on the chairs, so we put, each one of them got a little felt pad on them to try to help the problem out, which it did. But there was an aftermath of that where we were continuing to be careful with the chairs. And it was really nice, it's just kind of something that comes out of the blue, one of those mundane experiences that, there's the Buddhist teaching right there, trying to work together and working through this situation that wasn't awful, but it prompted us to kind of do things that we wouldn't have even thought of doing. And I happened to be reading a book by Shunryu Suzuki, and found that he had a chair episode as well in his dining hall. So I thought I would just read what he wrote. He said, instead of respecting things, we want to use them for ourselves. Yeah, we just want to sit down in the chair and get on with eating the meal, right? And then, if it's difficult to use them, we want to conquer them. So, and I don't know that we were conquering the chair, but we tried to make it more that the situation would be better so it wouldn't be so disruptive for everybody. So we did do that. When we pick up the chairs carefully without making much noise, then we will have the practice of Buddhism in the dining room. You know, we don't think about that, but that's actually a big thing to say. It's not like it's mundane, it's there, and it's profound, actually. That's what I'm trying to say. So you have the mundane and the profound coming together as a way in our daily life that we can recognize and do. That's something that's tangible. So this action was respect for things. We learned a lesson about that, and also harmony in the Sangha, or the community. And the last story I want to tell, then I'll move on to something else, is a story about it's a story about giving, and it's about giving. I've heard this, and I know it for my own experience, is that it's a giving out of knowing that what you have isn't enough. In other words, you don't have enough food, or you don't have enough gas for your car. It's that kind of, you don't have enough. And it is there's a lot of people that are living like that. And this did happen to me, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I couldn't think of another example, so here we go. This was when I was a young adult, and I can't remember if I was a student or trying to make a living, but I didn't have a lot of money. I mean, I really didn't have a lot of money. It was kind of tough. So, and you just I was making friends just as people usually do. And there was a woman who had some kids, and it was in the fall, and it was Thanksgiving was coming up, and this woman said, I don't have enough money to buy turkey for Thanksgiving so we can have a nice meal. And I had zero money, but I had $15 in my pocket. So I went out and I bought her a turkey. And I don't know why I did this. It wasn't because I wanted to have turkey or I wanted to go to the meal, but it was something that just prompted me to do it. And I had forgotten about it, and I really emptied my pockets out. And it had nothing, but there was some kind of thing that I needed to do that I just did. And it wasn't like, I don't remember it having an agenda, but I just feel that people that don't have a lot can be very generous. And I've heard that from other stories, but I couldn't come up with another story. So that's one that I had remembered from my own life. And again, that is giving out of sympathy when people don't have enough. That really giving isn't about having enough for yourself and then giving to somebody else, which you kind of have an excess of. You can give when you don't think you can. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because that giving is very close to what the heart really wants to do, the truth. And now I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, let's see, I don't know where to go with this. About the actions that I've talked about today, but also actions that are good and actions that are harmful. And this is what a Buddhist teacher has written that I thought would be helpful. And then I have a ridiculous story to tell about that one, but anyway, I will get to that in a minute. What he wrote is, all suffering is the result of harmful actions, while virtuous deeds are the cause of happiness and being at ease. The seeds of negativities, which are the harmful actions, are like promissory notes made out to a rich person when money is borrowed from him. When this person shows the promissory note, even after many years, there is no way that the debtor can avoid having to repay the loan. It is the same with positive and negative actions. The results may appear immediately, as when we have been cut by a knife or something else that could happen later on in the future. Nevertheless, the effects of every one of our actions must be exhausted, either through purifying and confessing them or through the experience of their consequences. They do not simply disappear with the passage of time. So that's a sobering thought. And I'm saying this because we have to keep this in mind, that our actions do have consequences, whether they're good or whether they're harmful. And I think it's interesting to me that we do notice the harmful acts that we do a lot more than the good things. And the good things we just kind of slide by with, but it's in a way, not always, but the things that we do that are harmful really can be quite a lot more noticeable. So along the lines of what always comes about, or whatever that word, whatever comes about again and again and again. And I find that with difficult situations that we seem to have to relive these things over and over and over again, that we just, in some certain kind of way, that things keep popping up that we need to look at. And so the thing that I want to address is our blind spots, and that's where we can look to see what we can do to change our ways of looking at things and doing things. So here's my ridiculous story. I was listening to the radio a couple of months ago. I was out at the Hermitage, and did you know that the character Batman has been played by like about a dozen different actors? You might have known that. Well, I didn't. So they went through all these different actors, this one and that one, which didn't do a lot for me, but they had one, and I don't even remember his name, but they had a clip from the movie itself, because they said, well, this Batman's a little bit different. So, and I just burst out of laughing because I thought, anyway, this made me laugh. So this is the dialogue. Batman said, this is about blind spots, okay? He says, I don't have emotions. I don't own any emotions. I don't even know what an emotion is. And since I don't know that they're there, I certainly don't want to talk about them. Okay? And so the response is, well, are you angry right now? Yeah, sure. Isn't that an emotion? That's what it says. So I thought to myself, it's so much like what we can do with our blind spots. We can say, they were so clueless sometimes about our blind spots that it's like we think that by denying them that they will go away. Well, they don't. I just feel like our blind spots will keep popping up in such resilient, repetitions. It's like as much as you try to brush them away, get rid of them, they don't go away. However, the Buddha's teaching I just love. So he says in this paragraph that we can just simply experience the consequences of what we do. And that's true, and we will. However, if we can look at what they are, and he says confess, and I think by looking at what we do, saying, when somebody says you have a blind spot, or it could be that you are doing such and such, and you can say, no, there's no way. Maybe, to not kind of brush that aside so quickly, but take a second and just reflect, well, maybe there is some truth in that. And to look at that and to, in meditation, it could be true and it could not be true, but if it is, have enough courage and to look at it and say, well, okay, now what can I do about that? What am I willing to do about that? And that is a way that we can, what's the word, ameliorate, where you kind of just change things around so that when these promissory notes come to us, then we won't be so surprised, and maybe we'll have more skill in learning how to deal with them. And I find that's an encouraging kind of thing. We don't have to just kind of stand up and take it, that kind of thing. But we actually can learn the skills, and those skills are what are the good deeds that I was talking about, the stories, things that we can do in our daily life that really aren't a big deal, but we can put these things in action, and they have consequences too. Here. So what happens when we practice these things that are good to do are two things. One is that we are showing that we trust the Dharma, which is a big deal in terms of turning your life around, because we are no longer taking so much refuge in the things that we have in the past that have caused us harm. And the other thing is that we are, there's something about, like I was saying, that we are responding. Good deeds have a way of being more in line with our true nature. And it can be just in that very moment when you do a good deed without an agenda, where things are just so, and you've done something. But those deeds that cause harm don't have that quality. They just don't. And it's almost that instant recognition of whoops, or oh my God, or whatever. So I think that there's some hope that that I'm trying to say, that we have hope in the world. There are a lot of people and a lot of us that are doing things that are good. And for some reason, those kind of things that are so harmful are really quite visible sometimes today, and they're just disturbing. And so we have to always to also recognize there is a balance here, and that we're part of that balance. So we're trying to kind of lean with the scales this one particular way, and we can do that. It's not, we're not doing heroics here. It's just ordinary things that can help ourselves out and help the world out. So I offer that to us all in the hopes of having a good day and making our way through this life in a way that will make it worthwhile for us and others. Thank you.